Hi guys, welcome to this week's Reclassified here on Ickonic.com. This week I want to speak about the hive mind. Not many people have been looking into this. This is like a real end games kind of point. Once the temple's built and everybody's running around as sort of part human, part robot, how will people be controlled and how will this actually work? And as always with these dark occultists or satanic lunatics or death cult madmen and women, they kind of base this on other principles. So we know that the British royals specifically, but many others with a lot of money and a lot of time, study the bee, and there's a reason why they study the bee. Also, they see us as insects as well, so they want to, if it's good enough for the bees, it's good enough for these worker bees, isn't it? Get away from me, stinging. It's fascinating subject, and it will lead us to what's happening with this transhumanist agenda and all these satellites in the sky. So let's have a look at the hive mind. So the first thing to have a look at is, why are bees associated with royalty? Bees have a long, multicultural history as symbols of sovereignty because of the perceived role of the queen bee, which was often misconstrued as king bee. So the queen bee obviously being the major bee that sends out her signals to everybody. It's absolutely fascinating. And they study these because they understand how they can just basically use the same principles on us. Again, they see us as insects. And Childeric may have been one of many who hoped to harness the parallels between social behaviour in bees and humans for his own agenda. That's basically just saying exactly what I've just said. The parallels between social behaviour in bees and humans, and to weaponise that for your own agenda. This is exactly what they're trying to do. So when Prince Charles is there, or King Charles now, as we have to call him, like a spaniel, he's there looking at his bees and going, oh, we love bees, do love the bloody bees. What they're actually saying is, look, we want you to be like the bees, and these guys, this system, we're going to implant on you and in you with some nanotechnology. The royal bees. It's common knowledge that there are beehives at Buckingham Palace, but did you know that there are hives at many of the other royals' estates too? I did. I don't know why he's questioning me on these things, but this writer is. King Charles is a huge fan of bees, bloody loves them, and he is known to have many beehives at his Highgrove House country home in Tetbury. I didn't even know he had that home. The beehives there are integrated into a large organic farm, and the gardens are said to be filled with plants and flowers that are attractive to pollinators. Basically, in you come, my pretties, into the garden. Well, I'll slaughter you. Some of the honey the bees produce can even be bought by the public from the Hivegrove Gardens website. I wouldn't. I'm not saying, but I just wouldn't. You just never know what's in there when it comes to the royals. The official Clarence House Twitter account, we've got an official Twitter account, has also posted often about their beehives at the loyal royal residence, urging summer visitors to Clarence House, bet they have, to look out for the beehives there. Look out and go and have a look how we'll keep you guys eventually. This is how we want you to live. So this was mad. Now I looked at this and I remember this coming out. Obviously the Queen passed away, apparently, or maybe just got transformed into another body, just slipped her in there into another vessel. Immortality, and that actually connects to this too. But when she passed, other than there being two Noahide rainbows over Buckingham Palace, someone had to inform the bees. Yes, the bees need to know that the queen bee literally has passed into another body. How were the bees told? I think this is fascinating. This is an age-old thing that they did. So the superstitious and somewhat cute tradition of telling the bees, as it's called, of a death in the family has been part of a rural British folklore for centuries. We've never done that in the Willett family, told the bees. It was no different for the death of Britain's longest reigning monarch Butterfly. How were the queen bees told? Palace keeper John Chappell told Mail Online he travelled to Clarence House and Buckingham Palace on Friday to tell the 7 beehives. 7 is obviously a really important number. Then you've got the Sabbath, which is their day of rest in this messianic lunatic Jewish mystic cult, which these guys are very much, although they're druids, part of, because it doesn't really matter at the end of the day. It's a messianic cult that goes through very loads of different kind of facilities and different avenues, such as the Freemasons and the Knights Templar, which are the Freemasons at the top level, the Messianic Chabad Lubavitch guys. It goes through all of these different kind of seemingly separate cults and sects, but they're all the same. The Illuminati, Bavarian Illuminati, and all that lot. But 7 is really important. So you've got the Chabad and the Jewish arrest on the 7th, mysticism. It's the day before, the 8th day of when they light the menorah candle, the 8th. And that's their world to come. So they have a 1,000-year rest, and we've been through that before. But so 7 is really important there. They understand the nature of reality. They use the themes and they study God's design and see how they can manipulate it and use it. And it's exactly what they're doing by studying the bee. I'm at the hives now. This is what John Chappell said. And it is traditional when someone dies that you go to the hives and say a little prayer and put a black ribbon on the hive, the 79-year-old said. I'm not saying he understands what they were doing with these bees, but, maybe he does. I draped the hives with a black ribbon and with a bow. Mr. Chappell said he delivered the same message at both locations in hushed tones. Excuse me, bees. The queen is dead. And then just leg it before they get angry. You knock on each hive and say, the mistress is dead. Oh, the mistress, that's interesting. But don't you go. Your master will be a good master to you, he said. So that's how they tell the bees. They're telling of the bees. So they have to, that's how important these bees are to them. They have to tell the bees that the queen is dead, the actual queen, not the queen bee queen. Well, that is the queen bee queen, but you know what I mean. This is another version. So a lot of people understand that the bee was the symbol of the Merovingian bloodline. Now, the Merovingian bloodlines comes into this holy blood, holy grail that you guys have done a lot of research into. You'll understand it's supposed to be this pure bloodline passed down through Jesus' bloodline, possibly from David and Jacob and Noah and all of these guys. And it possibly is another bloodline, and not in the traditional or in the messianic sense of like these Jewish mysticists believing that they are of another bloodline, but there may be some sort of reptilian Rh negative bloodline to this. So they're trying to pass that down in its purest form through this Merovingian bloodline, and it's the bee that symbolises this bloodline. These Merovingian bees inspired Napoleon, who, in a departure from the fleur-de-lis used from the reign of Hugh Capet in the 10th century, adopted them as the symbol of the French Empire. The signet ring, bearing the words Childeric Regis and the engraved portrait of the long-haired king, which had been the key to identifying the treasure, was stolen from the Cabinet des Médailles in the National Library of France in 1831. The investigation of the theft was led by famous former criminal turned detective Eugene Francois Vidocq. However, the case was never solved and the missing items were never recovered. What's really interesting about that, then, Napoleon took on this bee after swapping it out basically for the fleur-de-lis. But you find out later on that they're actually one and the same thing anyway. So this is the Merovingians' emblem. What's interesting about this here is that the bee there is inside the hexagram. And that is the kind of shape that they make their honeycomb out of. And obviously, this is also the cube of Saturn, the same shape. And it all relates to the same thing. I'm not saying I understand it fully. You're getting to the point where all of these things just superimpose over each other, obviously. So the Merovingians claim descent from Jesus. And so do the Mormons. And they have the symbolism of the bee in common. So they use this symbol here. So the Merovingian Dagobt's emblem, and there's the bees of the Merovingian king Childeric. So, and Napoleon took that on later as well. But that fits inside the hexagon there. And that obviously is the cube of Saturn. And then it overlaps into the Seal of Solomon, which is the Star of David. All these things symbolize the same thing in their mystique language. So once you start to decode it, which is what we're doing on a weekly basis, we can see exactly what they mean. So this is Napoleon. Thus, by adopting the bee As a symbol, Napoleon emphasized his connection with the Merovingian royal dynasty. He also replaced the lily, which would be Lilibet or Elizabeth, and there's also Elizabeth mixed in there as well, the symbol of the previous dynasties, with a bee, which in inverted form looked like a lily. Exactly, so he's inverting it again, another inversion of the previous incarnation. Together, this demonstrated the continuity of power and its legitimacy. So he adopted Napoleon, the bee there. This is all leading somewhere, by the way. So how do they communicate? And this is the whole hive mind system that we're looking into today. This is the important thing. That's why they study these bees. That previous bit of information was just to show you how important they clearly believe this system to be of the bees and what they've learned from them. Honeybees can't speak, of course, but scientists have found that the insects combine teamwork and odour chemicals to relay the queen's location to the rest of the colony, revealing an extraordinary means of long-distance mass communication. Just occurred to me, that makes kind of like interesting what Prince Andrew said about never being able to sweat, although he blatantly could. Maybe that was a key, because it never really made any sense, because he said, I have a peculiar condition where I can't sweat, and then he's shown sweating. Oh, well, I couldn't sweat, he said, and now he can. He just turned it on. But that was maybe a nod and a wink in code to something else, because this appears to be something to this odour chemicals. The research is really nice and really careful, says Gordon Berman, a biologist at Emory University who was not involved in the study. It shows once again, he says, the insects are capable of exquisite and complex behaviours. So this is how they communicate. Honeybees communicate with chemicals called pheromones, which they sense through their antenna. That the antenna will become the human antenna will be. Well, the human is an antenna. Dr. Robin Kelly wrote a book about that. The nanotechnology is going to wire us in to this Skynet. That will be the antenna that they're looking for, because we are already wired in to the ether. We are a human antenna. They want to take that from the ether, unplug it there, and stick it into their web of deceit, their internet web of deceit. Like a monarch pressing a button, the queen emits pheromones to summon worker bees to fulfill her needs. So imagine this being in a temple. But her pheromones only travel so far. Busy worker bees, however, roam around, and they too can call to each other by releasing a pheromone called Nesenov through a gesticular known as scenting. They raise their abdomens and expose their pheromone glands and fan their wings to direct the smelly chemicals backwards. So she's got a signal, this queen bee, from the temple. So in this concept, let's say Solomon's temple, the queen bee sitting there, the king bee or the antichrist is sitting there, this system putting out this broadcast, which we know the bad guys have said that they want Solomon's temple to be a broadcasting system and a gateway between heaven and earth. So there's this AI cult, or there's this antichrist figure pushing out this hive mind broadcast to his worker bees. Now, it only travels so far in terms of the bees, so other bees pick up on that and have to call the rest into line, and this is how it works. Once the first worker honeybees located the queen, they began to assemble chains of evenly spaced bees that extended outward from the queen. They literally started to fall in line, with each bee wafting Nasanov to its neighbour down the line. The findings reported that this month in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Science, none, are the first direct observations of this collective communication in honeybees. Like smelly breadcrumbs, that sounds like a terrible nightclub, the branching communication lines guided far off honeybees back to the queen's location, a feat no single bee could do on their own, so they need us to do this. So we'll be passing this Skynet-driven broadcast from the temple broadcast palace to each other. That's how it will go. In terms of technology, this will be done through transhumanist technology, nanotechnology. A really great analogy is the game of telephone, says Orit Peleg, a computer scientist at CU and a senior author on the study. You whisper a word in your neighbour's ear and they pass it to their neighbour and so on, and usually it just comes out as something completely different by the end, so they don't know how they're going to get around that. The researchers shed some light on how honeybees recruited one another into these scent relays, and this is a really important bit. Now, this will remind you of something very recent. They noticed that bees in the relays spaced themselves about 6 centimeters apart. According to Peleg, this suggests the bees are detecting a certain amount of pheromones, dropping what they're doing and joining in to pass on their own pheromones. So they're getting in to basically the vibrational pull of the other person who's actually who knows the broadcasting message. And as they come too close, they pull them in to line, and they do more. And obviously the line gets bigger, and the outgrowth, like a drop in a pebble in the river, spreads out and out and out with the ripples. So this was really interesting when I read that. 6 centimeters apart, which wasn't much different from the 6 foot apart. Why did they try and get us to stand 6 feet apart with this whole COVID madness? Now, they tried to play it off as just being arbitrary. CDC's 6-foot social distancing rule was arbitrary, says former FDA commissioner. One of former President Trump's commissioners of the Food and Drug Administration, Dr. Scott Gottlieb, told CBS Face the Nation Sunday that the 6-foot social distancing rule created to slow the spread of coronavirus was arbitrary and decreased the confidence in the pandemic response. It wasn't arbitrary. What they were doing was studying how far apart you can be in your auric field, because you're already connected to this cosmic internet, the ether, before you can't communicate how absurd and ridiculous this whole thing is. That was the whole point. So they say it's arbitrary. They're trying to get you to not figure out the fact that they were experimenting on humanity. And this 6-foot distance correlates, by the looks of it, in my theory, in my view, to the 6 centimeters apart from the bees. They were communicating this broadcast from one another. They wanted to see in this COVID scam how far apart we had to be physically, so we wouldn't communicate through common sense how much bollocks this all COVID madness was. So this is the auric field. It's called the toroidal field, and this was from a guy who sent me this on the net, and it was on X, and it was really helpful. The toroidal field of the human body is a donut-shaped energy field primarily associated with the heart's electromagnetic field. This field extends several feet beyond the body, forming a torus shape. The heart generates the largest electromagnetic field in the body, and this field plays a crucial role in health, emotional state, and spiritual awareness. It acts as a bridge between the physical. This is how you have a common sense with other people. And they wanted to have people physically apart because they knew, they wanted to see how physically apart you had to be before you couldn't no longer communicate. And that's really interesting. Again, they study these things. So they studied how close the bees had to be, and then how far apart humans have to be. Obviously, they've back engineered it, twisted it around to cause the opposite effect. But so what is also interesting, again, so we'll have a look at this in the analogy of what we're talking about here, the roles they'll put humans into. So in the bee colony, in the hive mind, you get given a role. So lesson 2, role clarity in terms of the bees. And remember, they're going to put this on humans. According to McHale, each bee steps into a specific role and takes up the role in harmony with the bees who take on different roles. Now, them roles will be given to you. Do you remember 060606? The patent by Bill Gates, Microsoft? It was to give you awards of cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, for certain tasks that you completed. It's the same thing. You will be given a certain job role. You will be a worker bee, and you will be given a certain job role. Some worker bees fly out to forage for food supplies that will turn golden nectar into honey, she says. Others serve as nurses, caring for the young and feeding them royal jelly to ensure growth and success. You will be given your job, and that's why they study the bee. They're studying the system of the bee, the queen bees broadcasting the rules out to the rest of the world, and it's all in line. It's just basically global fascism, communism, socialism, base, whatever you want to call it. You will be one hive mind, and this is what they want to put in place, I believe. This was really interesting. So it comes back to the shapes and the symbols again. So you can see there the what they're making, the beehive they're making, and how it's formed together. Chances are you've heard a co-worker refer to themselves as a worker bee. That's because bees are known for their capacity for organisation and hard work. A bee hive is a complex structure with thousands of bees working together for the common good of the colony. I mean, you could just see this, obviously. That's, again, why they study these things. Each bee has a specific role within the colony, and their coordinated efforts keep the hive functioning efficiently. Now, you can see there the shape of that. What was really interesting, when you look at the beehive there, obviously that is the same shape as the hexagon. That's the shape they make. Now, this was suggested that the bee was the inspiration for the fleur-de-lis. So with Napoleon basically dropping the fleur-de-lis and going back to the bee, it seems like he realised that the roots of the fleur-de-lis was actually the bee anyway. And that's fascinating. And when you look at the Merovingian emblem, the bee fits perfectly inside that hexagon. So the fleur-de-lis. And there's other versions of this as well. Other things that this fleur-de-lis seems to just incorporate in, and it comes back into this Chabad Lubavitch guys and the Lurianic Kabbalah that they all believe in. The fleur-de-lis also represented the tree of life, which also descends to the netherworld. Notice in Coleridge's poem that the volcano Diamond Tithias is ejaculated all over the sky. I do apologise about that. I didn't write that. That's disgusting. The fleur-de-lis is frequently found in ancient Egypt artifacts. In this next excerpt from ancient Egyptians and the constellations can be seen as a connection between Osiris. Oz and Osiris are the same people, who is identified with the Kabbalistic tree of life and the Plantard bloodline. We've heard of them as well. They're definitely involved with these modern day royals, especially the British royals, who are not British at all. In ancient Egyptian texts, the tree of life grew out of the sacred mountain, its branches reaching out and supporting the star and planet studded sky, while its roots reached down into the watery abyss of the netherworld. The trunk of the tree of life represented the world pillar or axis mund, literally axis of the mound, around which the heavens appeared to revolve. The world pillar was the centre of the universe. I find that absolutely fascinating. That's the world pillar. So let's have a look at this. So the tree of life also represents the world pillar, which was basically Atlas was given the role of holding the worlds up after the pillar was collapsed. So this world pillar didn't just separate the heavens from the earth, it separated the earth from hell as well. So there was two pillars. That's why you have the North and South Pole. This is what it all means. So maybe the Nazis went to one of the poles and weren't looking for what you thought they were looking for. This was all Kabbalistic occultism and symbology. We don't know. But it's really interesting that the fleur-de-lis is the bee, by the looks of it, and is also a representation of the tree of life, which fits inside the hexagon, which would be the matrix shape. So here we have a depiction of that. So there's the world pillar, the axis mund, and there's the one at the bottom there and the one at the top. And as I said, I think it was in last week's show about them wanting to twist it upside down. CJB Books, Christopher John Bjertness talked about this, of turning the tree of life upside down and flipping it at the end times. So the world would be upside down and it would be hell on earth. So this is all attached in this Kabbalistic understanding, and there's different versions of the Kabbalah. There's the Kabbalah with the Q, the Lurianic Kabbalah. There's the kind of Madonna's Kabbalah, which is just really kind of like to stop people looking any deeper into, go, oh, I know what the Kabbalah is. Because it means different things for different people. That's how they do it. They layer it. So it might mean one thing to one lot, but they want it to mean loads of different things. They know what it means to them, and that's what's important. It's a very, very clever thing, because you get people arguing about what it actually means, because it's not really important what it means overall. it's important what it means to these guys and what they use it for. So that's really interesting. They're going to flip that world pillar upside down and collapse the realities in on each other. This is the Egyptian tree of life here. So this was round way before the Kabbalah. There's the Egyptian tree of life there. They've known these things for a very long time. The tree of life is a esoteric principle. It's a spiritual principle, but they've obviously used it and tried to make it into a physical thing at their Solomon's temple. So there you go. There's the tree of life there, and the Kabbalah one that you will all be far more familiar with. Malkut at the bottom there is the earth, and there obviously is the three pillars, Yakin and Boaz on the left and right, which is blue and red, and the one in the middle will be Tower 7 or Building 7, the Salomon building, which is there in the middle, and that's what they all represent. This is what they're telling you. It's fascinating to me. But they study the bee and they study these symbols, and they communicate with each other, which is the broadcast from one bee colony, which is the cult, to another, and they broadcast their language to each other like this through these signs and symbols because they study the bee. It happens in the cool of the night, the largest movement of livestock in Australia. Ahead of spring, honeybee hives are loaded into netted trucks that follow the flowering of crops ready for pollination. The precious cargo includes queen bees, the linchpins of any hive, and thousands upon thousands of workers that serve them. This is what it is. Bees are remarkable creatures who built their homes out of waxy hexagons and communicate through what's known as the waggle dance. I won't read all of that, but the waxy hexagons. What's the shape of the hexagon? It's the honeycomb. That looks like Blockbusters to me. But the hexagon is what we're looking at. And that is, obviously, the pole of Saturn. So when you're looking at the world poles again, it all connects back in. This is the hexagon. That is the cube of Saturn when it's in 3D. It's the cube. It's the land of Nod, the black cube. And it's the cube of Jerusalem or Zion, which is the white or gold cube. And they come down, so above as below. And they possibly will collapse into each other. You've got all the signs and symbols there. I'm not saying this is actually going to happen. Remember, this is the beliefs that these guys have. And I'm trying to figure out with you guys how they communicate this stuff to each other. So the bee fits, the worker bee fits inside that. And you could see that as the cube of the Matrix. You could see that as the cube of Saturn or the cube of Jerusalem. This reality. Here again. This is what I've tried to kind of look at last week as well. And this is the graphic that I used for last week's video, but it's worth going over again. The black and white flooring on the Freemasonic floor. What is all that about? That's the two cubes. The two hexagons. The white hexagon, the black hexagon. So above as below. And they're going to merge them too. That's what they're trying to do, to collapse the world poles in on each other. And we're beginning to start to understand what they mean by this. They're trying to, through their high mind in the cult, bring this about. And eventually, when the two cubes possibly fuse, their new cube, their new world order, will be their broadcasting system from the temple inside Solomon's temple. And this is what will be broadcast to every worker bee in the world that's left, which won't be many of us, because you have to be one of the 12 tribes to survive, or some sort of hybrid human 2.0 or Adam 2.0. So let's have a look at this. Let's have a look at the technology side of this. We've looked at why they study the bee, what they've learnt from the bee, and what they look to superimpose on humanity. But let's have a look at the technology side of this. In the world of science fiction, the notion that humanity will one day connect our brains together in a global hive mind dates back to a 1930s novel entitled The Last and First Man. I would say that's probably not the first time, but let's go with it, by Olaf Stapledon. It recounts a fictional future history in which humanity evolves biologically into a species that can link telepathically and form collective minds of extreme intelligence. Now, they always put it out in fiction first. We know the Huxley brothers put it out there in many of their stuff because they knew they were part of a eugenics cult. In the real world, this pursuit is called collective superintelligence, and it will not require telepathy or other fictional devices. Instead, it will use emerging generative AI, and we'll go into what that is in a little while, technologies to connect a large human group in real time to deliberative systems, enabling us to solve difficult problems by harnessing our combined knowledge, wisdom, and insight in powerful ways. Now, this isn't implying that you will be connected physically. That's implying that these collective superintelligent systems will use generative AI to make this work. So you'll still be a physically separate human being, but you've got AI in the middle communicating ideas to each other and sorting through them. That's what they mean by this part, and that's what they're selling it as. So this is from the Cornell University. Towards collective superintelligence, amplifying group IQ using conversational swarms. There's a reason why they use conversational swarms. So this was, and I won't go into the nuts and bolts of this because it's quite in depth, but they used groups of people, and I do believe it was groups of 7 people, or it was 7 groups of 10. There was a 7 involved, and they called them swarms. And basically, they would come up with ideas in their group of 7 and put these ideas into the AI system. And that AI system will create all the ideas and come out with the answer for them, which is basically what we're looking at. But they sell it as the human is separate. But there'll become a point where that human will not be separate. And also, that will be an input-output system. And this is where, this is the hive mind. And this is where this is all heading to. So you will come up with these ideas. But will you? Will they be your ideas? Eventually, how would you tell the difference? Brain-to-brain interfaces, the science of telepathy, the conversation. So what's a brain-to-brain interface? This is what we're looking at. Have you ever wondered what it would be like to walk a mile, or 1.6 kilometers, which is 7? Do you remember, like, they put this in the articles because it's a nod and a wink to those who are reading it. So there'll be a code in there to say this is written by someone who understands the Kabbalah and where this is going. So at one point, there's no reason for them to put to walk a mile or 1.6 kilometers in this article. No one really cares how many kilometers a mile is. But they had to put it there. So 1.6 kilometers is the signal of 7, as we said earlier, to these Kabbalists. That someone who knows what they're talking about is writing this. Or at least publishing this. In somebody else's shoes, or have you ever tried to send a telepathic message to a partner in transit to pick up milk on your way home? They always put this kind of like, oh, it's just a laugh, isn't it? Recent advances in brain-computer interfaces are turning the science fantasy of transmitting thoughts directly from one brain to another into reality. Studies published in the last 2 years have reported direct transmissions of brain activity between 2 animals, between 2 humans, and even between a human and a rat. Michael Jackson had a rat called Ben. Maybe he could have done with his technology. These brain-to-brain interfaces, BBIs, allowed for direct transmission of brain activity in real time by coupling the brains of 2 individuals. This is what they're doing. Reading the brain waves. Brain-to-brain interface is made possible because of the way brain cells communicate with each other vibrationally. Cell-to-cell communication occurs via a process called and known as synaptic transmission, where chemical signals are passed between cells resulting in electrical spikes in the receiver cell. Synaptic transmission forms the basis of all brain activity, including motor control, memory, perception, and emotion. Your experience and your understanding of reality. Because cells are connected in a network, brain activity produces a synchronized pulse of electricity and electrical activity, which is called a brain wave. A brain wave. Again, it's all waves and electrical waves, which you usually would be plugged into the ether, but they now wouldn't let you to be plugged in, popped out of that one, unplugged, and put into their beast system, which will broadcast from Solomon's Temple. Brainwaves change according to the cognitive processes that the brain is currently working through and are characterized by the time-frequency pattern of the up and down states, oscillation. For example, there are brainwaves that are characteristics of the different phases of sleep and patterns characteristic of various states of awareness and consciousness. They map the brain. We know that Obama and many others were to do with trying to map the human genome and the brain and all of this stuff. This is why, because they're studying us as pets, as insects, and how to hive mind us. Technical telepathy. So here we get into this transhumanist agenda. This is what the likes of Peter Thiel and Elon Musk are pushing. Now, Thiel is called, I don't know if that's his real name. I've had conspiracies about these names like George Lucas, light. Spielberg means big lie, Spielberg. That these aren't their real names. Peter Thiel, which is an anagram of the reptile, by the way. Teal is the colour, which is like an ocean blue colour. It's the colour that Shekinah uses for the protection of this lie from the evil eye, which is our ability to see them. They see us as the evil eye, us trying to find out what they are and reveal their scam. But that colour is like a teal ocean blue. So I'm thinking that Peter Thiel may not have been his own real name, or if it is, this is all a bloody matrix. Technical telepathy. The electrical nature of the brain allows not only for sending of signals, but also for the receiving of electrical pulses. These can be delivered in a non-invasive way, it won't be, using a technique called transcranial magnetic stimulation, TMS. A TMS device creates a magnetic field over the scalp, right over your head, which then causes an electrical current in the brain. When a TMS coil is placed over the motor cortex, the motor pathways can be activated. It can basically make you punch someone, resulting in movement of a limb, hand or foot, or even a finger or toe, or a penis. Scientists are now working on ways to sort through all the noise in brainwaves to uncover specific signals that can then be used to create an artificial communication between animals. It won't be animals, it'll be humans, but they don't see us as humans anyway. The first demonstration of this was in 2013 study when a pair of rats were connected through a BBI to perform a brain-to-brain interface to perform a behavioural task. The connection was reinforced by giving both rats a reward when the receiver rat performed the task correctly. So there's a Pavlovian kind of reward part of this. So when you go back to 060606, the patent of the lunatic Bill Gates giving you Bitcoin for completed tasks, this is all folds in. There's still a reward element to this. It'd probably just be drugs eventually. Hot on the heels of this study was a demonstration that a human could control the tail movement of a rat by a brain-to-brain interface. We know that the brain-to-brain interfaces can work between humans too. By combining EEG and TMS, scientists have transmitted the thought of moving a hand from one person to a separate individual who actually moved their hand. Now they are able to do this from different parts of the world through the internet. And this is what I'm saying, is they're taking this principle of the queen bee, giving out their orders. They're putting this through a system of Starlinked satellites all over the world into the nanotechnology, or the Tannin Iva, as we've called it in terms of this Kabbalistic madness, which was the steed that took Lilith to meet Samael, and together they combined to make the beast. They're going to use this nanotechnology, in my view, perhaps to be the connection to this beast system via the internet. So the brain-to-brain interface will be this nanotech system inside you, and that will be connected the other end to the queen bee in Solomon's Temple. And you can see how this is all coming together. The BBI works best when both participants are conscious cooperators in the experiment. That seems to imply a little bit of tacit compliance there. In this case, the subjects were engaged in a computer game. This is going to be the same thing. They're leading people towards it. So they're just putting this stuff out there to kind of normalize it. This is what they always do. Thinking of you. The latest advance in human BBI's brain-to-brain interfaces represents another leap forward. This is where transmission of consciousness or conscious thought was achieved between two human beings in August last year, using a combination of technologies including EEG, the internet, and TMS. So the internet is the middleman in there. The team of researchers was able to transmit a thought all the way from India to France, and I won't go into the specifics of this, but they were able to transmit a thought from one person to the next via the internet. So when you're looking at these 7 groups putting ideas in there, and then they're selling it as the internet and the AI, the learning AI is going to just help you come up with an idea. It's not. It's going to put that idea back into your head and broadcast that idea to everybody else in the chain of command. Conscious brain-to-brain communications in humans using non-invasive technologies. What do you mean non-invasive? They always put this kind of inverted. Of course it's invasive. You're making people do what they don't want to do. I won't read through all of this either. Human sensory and motor systems provide the natural means for exchange of information between individuals and hence the basis for human civilization. The recent developments of brain-computer interfaces, they call them BCIs, it's the same thing, has provided an important element for the creation of brain-to-brain communication systems, and precise brain stimulation techniques are now available for the realization of non-invasive computer-brain interfaces. These technologies, BCI and CBI, can be combined to realize the vision of non-invasive computer-mediated brain-to-brain communications between subjects. That's the point. It's computer mediated. The computer will be the one putting the thoughts out there, not just as a pass-through. And this is what I believe all these Skylink and Starlink satellites going in the sky, and Elon Musk pushing for a human to be combined, human 2.0, with technology, just because AI will take over. AI is supposed to take over a group of humans. They can't do anything without the vessel of a human. They just want to augment the vessel of the human so it works and the queen bee can send out all their signals. This is why they study these things. Here's an image of this BCI to CBI connections. So you've got motor imagery, and they've even got the feet of how far apart they need to be. So they studied this during COVID, how far apart we had to be so our auric field wouldn't communicate between each other. This is what it's all about. They're studying us. They're studying us in the beehive, the worker bees, and what we'll do. And that's all going into this artificial learning intelligence system that they want to stand and have as their beast system in their Solomon's temple. Their bee system. Their queen bee system broadcasting from Solomon's temple out into the minds of men, or transhuman men that have got this technology in them. And you will just be slaves to the system. It's literally going to be that way. I'm not saying they're going to be able to do this because they're lunatics and many of them are idiots. But they're going to hurt a lot of people and kill a lot of people along the way with this madness. And they're doing it. They're just selling it as a benefit to humanity, as they always do. So you can see there from the image, it's going from one person's brain to the next, and it's insane. So right in the middle there, internet communication, 001001, 0. Ins and outs, ones and zeros. That's what they want to reduce this down to. That's why they study these things. So this all brings us to Elon Musk. And he is clearly not the brainchild, literally, of any of this stuff. He's just a front man. But he's the one selling this idea. Obviously, he was in Iron Man. He dressed as the god of Mars. The element of Mars is iron, so he was Mars Man. You can see in there his inverted cross, which is the upside down crucifix, and the Baphomet type head, which is also the god of Mars, and these sort of things, clearly representing this kind of god that he believes he's been brainwashed into literally believing that he is. And this is what they're doing with SpaceX Shield and a military industrial complex. In September of 2023, Bloomberg reported that SpaceX has received its first contract from the US Space Force to provide customized satellite communications for military under SpaceX's new Starshield program. The move, Bloomberg noted, would extend Elon Musk's role as a defense contractor. And this is from Derek Bros. This is a Derek Bros article, a fantastic guy who's been on the show. He's done great work exposing the transhumanist lunacy in terms of funding and the technology side of things of Elon Musk and his little merry men of lunatics. Starshield will offer services to the military for 1 year using SpaceX's existing Starlink satellites. Air Force spokeswoman Anne Stefanak told Bloomberg that the contract provides for Starshield end-to-end, brain-to-brain service via the Starlink constellation, user terminals, ancillary equipment, network management, and other related services. Basically, this is cybernetics. So when you look at that in terms of cybernetics, the cybernetic system that they're setting up in terms of this B system is literally this. And I won't read through that whole article. It's a fantastic article from Derek Bros, and you can find it on his website. What we're talking about here, then, is, to wrap this up, is they're looking at the bee, they study the bee, they see the system that works for the bee, they try and implement that on human beings. So the cybernetics, which is the study of whole systems complete, how this system works, the in and out of it, the input-output ratio, which Musk talks about all the time, overriding it, is you'll have the Solomon's Temple there, which will be within the cube of Jerusalem, Zion, perhaps merged with the cube of the land of Nod, hell, basically the black and white cubes overlaid over each other, which is the Star of David, so above as below. That system, so that Solomon's Temple within that city, the New Jerusalem, will broadcast the message from the Queen Bee, which will be AI, the beast system, from the temple into the minds of the transhumans that are left, the human 2.0, with this nanotechnology in them, and that information will be bounced off Starlink satellites, the Starlink systems, and that's how it's going to work. And you might have to be they'll use humans as an antenna, because we are already, as Dr. Robin Kelly has already pointed out decades ago, we are human antennas. But what they've done is taken that principle and unplugged us from the ether and the information that we get through just the knowing that we have as human beings, and plugged us into their beast system. They've rerouted humanity into their system, and that's what they're going to do. There won't be many of us left if they get to this point, but that's what they aim to do. Is they're creating their own cybernetic system to carry the message of the Queen Bee to every worker bee left on planet Earth. And transhumanists and Elon Musk, messianic madness, end times prophecies, and all of this world to come, new world order, is all part of this same thing. So guys, I hope you enjoyed that, and that kind of cleared up some of the ways in which these lunatics operate. I'm not saying, again, they're going to get these things done. These are lunatics, and some of them are morons. Many of them are morons, but it is a cult. And a death cult kills a lot of people. And if we can get this information out there, we can stop people from going along with their own enslavement. I've got a fantastic interview coming up with 7 Seas, part 1. We've got 2 interviews, so there's a 2-hour interview. We'll do part 1 this week and part 2 next week. He's a fantastic researcher, and we'll go into many of these things as well. Remember to do your own research, come to your own conclusions, and I'll see you in a week's time. Take care. Goodbye. Hi guys, welcome to this week's Classified here on Ickonic.com. I'm here with a new guest, 7 Seas. He's someone who's got an incredible understanding of this information, and it's great to meet new people that you can speak to. We were just chatting before we started recording of the narrow band that you're in the middle if you're not politically or religiously or faith-wise aligned, and you kind of see it all for what it more than likely is. So it's great to meet someone like 7 Seas. Thank you for giving me your time. We're going to do a 2-hour show, so we'll do 1 hour this week and 1 hour next week. But thank you for your time.
Yeah, and thanks, Rich, for having me. I'm right there with you. It seems like the more that you challenge the powers that be, regardless of who it is, and you start to like build that track record of calling it out on both sides, you make more enemies than you do friends. I was uh I was actually just arguing on Twitter with somebody about why Tucker Carlson is a CIA plant, and he agrees that yeah, maybe we're compromised, but no way Tucker is specifically compromised. And I'm like, we're saying the same things, man. I'm just saying there's one extra person in that circle.
Yeah, they've always got to have someone. Well, Tucker, I'll share a bit of information I've got about Tucker. Tucker's dad, Dick Carlson, was in with the USIA, which was basically the media arm of the government. And then he was put into positions of prominence by George H.W. Bush and Reagan. Those are both regular attendees of Bohemian Grove. And then you scroll up to Alex Jones' banner on his ex website, and who's he best friends with? Tucker Carlson. So he's the guy
Exactly.
exposed. He's exposed Bohemian Grove, but he's there with the guy whose dad was mates with the guys that regularly went to Bohemian Grove. So this is what you're dealing with, guys. But this is how deep it goes and the cognitive block off there. But how did you get into this information? Because, like, I mean, I'm sure you've been doing it more than longer than I've known you for the last month. But how did
Oh
you get into?
yeah. So I would say that when I was a teenager, I kind of started becoming politically aware and things like that. I remember initially having a lot of faith in like the what was the Occupy Wall Street movement in like its first coming weeks and stuff like that. That got me, you know, away from the sentiment that all governments are corrupt, and I got wrapped up in like the emotional roller coaster that was like 2016, and maybe having faith that there was, outsiders coming in to change the game. Realized that, over time nothing really changed. No matter who was in power, it seemed like everything, we were still going to war, we were still increasing the debt, government spending, and all this. So I just started to look, and I was like, well, let me see what is driving these people. I used to know about all the big corporate influences and banking influences, and I was ignorant to, how many ties the intelligence community has to media. I didn't even know about the Smith-Mundt Authorization Act when that got passed. I knew about Citizens United, the NDAA stuff, but things like that kind of flew under the radar. And I would say that with COVID, when that happened, that kind of reignited my understanding that all of the world's governments are operating in unison and they're saying the same thing, whether it's true or not. And that kind of that broke the mold for me of, okay, so it's not just the US government's bad guys and there's like a couple of other bad, it's everyone, everywhere, all the time. Um, Big pharma, media, politicians, scientists. It's the whole thing. And especially with this election and just sort of the way that the alt right stemmed off of COVID and seeing that whole thing become what it has become, and now they're in power. That that kind of shocked me a little bit. I think it was JD Vance getting tapped as VP that really sparked my digging into this alt-right transhumanist technocrat thing specifically. 2 months ago, maybe 3 months ago, I had discussed with a friend about David Icke's book, The Reveal, and how I wanted to get it and read it because he was talking a lot of it. Because I wasn't aware of who David Icke was before this year. Have to be completely honest, and I think that's intentional, because he's not the one that's siding with the elite when they just so happen to have a rhetoric that aligns with that person's talking points. So, but and I don't mean to keep rambling here, but essentially, like once I started looking into David Icke and hyper focusing on Peter Thiel, going back and looking at all of his ties through like Founders Fund and his operations in the 90s, his ties to like Drexel or the Lexel Durham banking stuff with like leverage buyouts, and how he kind of positioned himself with things like Founders Fund to buy up all these tech companies super early. And really just from there, I was like, I feel like I need to be talking about this because I don't see nearly enough people, while we do have, some good allies like you guys over there, at the Ike Network, like Whitney Webb, Derek Bros, people like that. I would say that it's way too few.
Yeah, I would agree. It's way too few, and I can count them. I've been doing this for about 15 years, and I can count the people that actually have stayed the course. And it's nice to have someone new to chat to, as I said. But Peter Thiel, I mean, we'll start with Peter Thiel. I know you covered it a little bit about another show on the network, but let's start with him. I mean, obviously, he comes from In-Q-Tel. In-Q-Tel is a venture capital firm of the CIA. So straight away, you've got Peter Thiel in there funding JD Vance, previously funded Donald Trump, so 2016. So these technocrats, these transhumanists who pretend to be Christians, aren't really Christians, they're messianic occultists, are deeply in around another man, messianic occultist, Donald Trump at the moment. Um, so when you started to look into that, because you said you knew about the political side of it and the business side, but then you start to see this occult, satanic, Luciferian, whatever name you want to call it. People argue over the terms. That's pointless. Um,
Yeah.
but you started to look into Peter Thiel, and what was kind of the first things that started to pop up with Peter Thiel for you?
Um, so I think when I first started digging into him, the things that really jumped out at me were obviously like his CIA Palantir ties and all that. But as you keep digging, you start to see, well, what is this thing about Gawker and Peter Thiel shutting down Gawker? And I looked into that story and how it was about Ambrosia, which was a company I'm sure you are very well aware of, but for those that don't, its entire business model was basically subsidizing young blood from whoever needed money to pump it into older people to try to infuse them with youth, which I don't know if that's like that's chimera transhumanism at its very basis. Like the who's that Brian Johnson guy that is like hyper focused on making himself live forever.
There is a guy that's involved with George Church, and George Church was, I don't know if that's the Brian Johnson guy, but it would be very similar. George Church is a guy that took money from Epstein and was on it in with Epstein, and he is a guy that looks a little bit like Santa. He works with this guy, and they're called. There's a name for it. No, it's not millennialist, but it's something like that where they want to live. They're studying people who live over 100. Centurionists, I think it's called.
Okay.
So it's a very similar thing, but the themes are there. This fountain of youth, live forever. This vampire thing of the blood and the the British royals were in there with Prince King Charles is a descendant of Vlad the Impaler, and so this
Yeah.
stuff is everywhere, mate. Yeah, but
Oh
yeah.
yeah. And it's crazy too because you know when people talk about like the child sacrifice stuff that surrounds like the Clintons and all these people that apparently do these like ritualistic things, the spirit cooking. There's also like roundabout ways to do child sacrifice. It's not necessarily that they have to like kill them or something. Like you look at like circumcisions, that's in some circles considered like a form of child sacrifice because it's a sacrifice of the flesh. Well, sacrifice of the blood, they can hide it behind science and all these terms, which are mostly Latin anyway, which is where a lot of the esoteric stuff comes from. But to me, it's what is it, that double speak where you make things way more bureaucratic to kind of remove them away from their original meaning. George Carlin had a whole bit about that back in the what was it, the 80s, 90s.
Yeah, he did. Yeah. So that basically they're just taking something and hiding an esoteric principle behind something that kind of would make sense. So in terms of Peter Thiel, I remember the Ambrosia thing, and which would yeah, it was the blood kind of ritual there. But I didn't understand. Yeah, I didn't know about the Grokka thing. But they all pretend to be enemies, don't they? They all pretend to have a lot of
Mm.
infighting whilst all being funded by the same people. So with Peter Thiel, when you started to see him coming into the JD Vance Trump thing, although it was with Trump 2016. What were you thinking when you first kind of found out a bit more information? Because I see you put some slides up in the background to show you these connections that are clearly there with him.
Oh yeah. I would say the thing that really jumped out, and I can pull this web up behind me if you'd like.
Yes, yeah.
Um, But the I think the thing that really stuck out to me was starting to see his name associated with things like Carbine 911, which was the basically the Israeli NSA program that was masquerading around as like an emergency service. One of the or two of the main investors in that not only was Peter Thiel in direct coordination with Ehud Barak. He's around here somewhere. Down here. Yeah. But Ehud Barak, who was the former Israeli prime minister. But you also had Jeffrey Epstein.
Yep.
And, they like, there's countless articles and stuff that go in about how he worked in coordination with him. And, I would wager to argue that this is the software that was used for Jeffrey Epstein's trafficking empire. I mean, how else do you get all this blackmail and dirt on people and be able to track where they are and things like that? And I think that Carbine was what he sold the NSA, just repackaged for Israel and their capabilities.
Well, I'll add
And
something. I'll add something to that to just back up exactly what you've just said. So it would have gone out last week now, but Juliet Bryant is a Epstein survivor, and she says in the interview that they handed her a disc with all of her emails and everything she's ever done, tracked for all her life, to her to try and intimidate her. And so yes, I would say you've just hit the nail on the head there. They've got this information, which is Palantir, obviously, but yeah. So to back up exactly what you said, an Epstein survivor was shown the fact they had everything, every email she ever sent, on a disc, and it was sent to us. So you nail on the head there.
yeah, and it's insane to think that all of this stuff is coming directly from Palantir, which the software itself. I remember Joe Rogan having a segment that kind of went viral where he talked about like the Project Pegasus, the black box that like collects everything all the time, and he talked about how evil and terrible it is and how it's unconstitutional and violates people's privacy, but then has the creator of it, Peter Thiel, on his podcast and like surrounds himself with all of his influences and things like that. Um, and it just like goes to show you the ability for them to sort of contort the truth and get people to believe not only not the truth, but almost the opposite of the truth.
Yeah, and that's the inversion principle of what they do. But so we had them. So he's a former prime minister of Israel. Obviously, we have Musk in there with clapping away like a seal to Netanyahu. Trump's in there with Netanyahu, with all her bad guys that I bang on about all the time because I think it's incredibly important. So what other connections have they got to this kind of transhumanist movement? You've got Google and SpaceX there, and Musk comes out and says, "Oh, I'm going to take over Google search engine with my own XAI engine, whilst being funded by Google Ventures at the same time." It's all ridiculous to me.
Oh yeah.
But you've come to the same conclusions I have, pretty much.
Oh yeah, yeah. Like when you go look through Musk and all of his ties to Peter Thiel, and you start to see, the he invested directly in Neuralink. He bought, X.com, the former bank, from him all the way back in the 90s. He has funded the Boring Company, which, I think is being used for like deep underground military bases and constructing things like that. Neuralink obviously is like the what I would consider de facto definition of transhumanism. You're augmenting the most important critical functioning organ of your body with directly with not only hardware but software and electrodes in your brain. This was MK Ultra like process. They're just taking the playbook and adding a price tag to it, and people are eating it up. Um, you have where he was in with like OpenAI. We have through his Teal Fellowship, oddly enough, I ended up finding something in connection with. Have you ever heard of Laura Deming?
No, that's new to me.
So she was a recipient of the Teal Fellowship, which is Teal's whole thing, where if he sees like you're doing work that he's interested in, he will pay you a grant to drop out of school and then promise to fund whatever it is that you're doing.
Right.
And
Okay.
he's spawned people like Austin Russell, who created Luminar Technologies, which is the biggest lidar tech partner for Tesla. Oyo Hotels, if you've started to see those pop up anywhere and everywhere, they're taking the US by storm. Those are Peter Thiel backed entities. Ethereum itself, Vitalik Buterin got one, but Laura Deming herself got one, and she's tied to this company called IP Immortal, which is like anti-aging technology. And it says that literally she wants to extend the human lifespan for a few more centuries at the very least. She started working in biogerontology. I don't even know. I might have butchered that lab when she was 12. Matriculated at MIT when she was 14, and now at 17 plans on disrupting the current research paradigm by changing the incentives embedded in today's traditional funding structures. So, like pumping dark money into transhumanist companies and things like that. Too often, researchers design quick incremental projects to please grant making bodies instead of taking on risky, long time horizon problems. With her fund IP Immortal, Laura plans on commercializing anti-aging research, bringing therapies out of the lab and into the market sooner. And
That's
she's on
insane.
the Peter Thiel like Wikipedia, the fellowship recipient article on here. Like that's where I've found her name. So it's like open, and they're just hoping people aren't looking past like one degree of separation.
But that's it, yeah. And when you do put things out like this, people go, "Oh, that is just 5 degrees of separation." Well, that's how it works. That's how you work your way up the ladder here, and you're completely right. I mean, that is very close to what I was saying about this other chap. I can't find his name now. Who works with George Church about the Centurion thing. The themes are there again, and they're not meaning living longer for us. They mean they're living longer for
Right.
them. They're scared because they're scared of death. They actually are a death cult, which is an inversion because they're terrified of death. They want us to die and them to stay alive, which is really, really strange. And actually, it's the opposite of what the Gnostics want. Some of the Gnostics, anyway. There's a certain sect of Gnostics, not all Gnostics, who want to get out of this place. So there's
Mm-hmm.
kind of like a reversal there. It's all very, very interesting when you start to look at it. But the anti-aging tech, I mean, the boring companies thing that you said earlier as well, I completely agree with you. Elon Musk boring company there. He, to me, is what is going on. That sort of technology is the technology they've been using under, well, for decades in New Mexico. And there's clearly things going on under New Mexico, with Zorro Ranch, Dulce Base, Los Alamos National Laboratory, and the Trementina site of Scientology, L. Ron Hubbard, Jack Parsons, the Babylon Working Ritual, which is what a video that I put out last week. So what we're seeing here is they're bringing esoteric old rituals, and we'll talk about Rome later on, which is Babylon removed or moved on even. Um, they're taking old rituals from thousands of years ago in Babylon and bringing them up to date with technology. They think they can bring them to pass with technology. Is that something that you've found a theme of?
Yeah, I it's actually interesting when you uh dig into Rome, because you start to see like a lot of the parallels, where my journey into Rome was seeing that somewhere around like the 300s or so, that there was this subversion into what I would consider a theocracy, and basically wrapping all of Rome under the umbrella of Christianity. And then what was it, like 50 years later, Rome had fallen.
Hmm.
um and I'm starting to see the what I would consider early warning signs of that, with not only this, occult transhumanist infiltration of the right, but also the overwhelming resurgence of what I would consider, faith in Christianity itself. Because I'll be honest, I didn't see Christianity becoming like a marketable thing in 2024, but it seems to be what generates tons of engagement across the board, and it's almost like they're rewarding people for bringing that back into the fold and saying, hey, let's unite, politics, science, and belief all together. And that's kind of what led, I think, to the fall of Rome itself.
Yeah, they definitely subverted what was originally Christianity, if you want to call it that. And there's all sorts going on with that in terms of whether there was an actual person. It definitely wasn't called Jesus, by the way. It was probably called Emmanuel, which they even desecrated by making a soft porn in the 70s about it, which I thought was quite funny. I didn't know that in the 80s, obviously,
Mhm.
but so they've changed the name, they've changed everything. There's no y in the Hebrew language at the moment, or Yah. So
Yeah.
no, it's Yah because Yahweh, but so it's pretty clear that they're bringing it and weaponizing it back now. But really, what you're looking at in terms of Donald Trump and these guys, these Messianic guys, isn't really Christianity, is it? It's actually an
Mm-mm.
inversion of that, and they're definitely sacrificing what we would term Christian true believers on the altar of this Messianic cult. Is this something that again that you've come across in terms of these technocratic guys mixing it in with this messianic agenda?
Yeah, actually, oddly enough, I started to look into like the Masonic imagery that Elon Musk has basically paraded his entire career, and was
Right.
able to find a post that he decided to make to kind of cap it all off for me as a good talking point. I can probably
Yes,
actually bring
absolutely.
that up.
Yeah.
So his post about the two towers, right here, his Starlink towers. Um, I think extremely interesting when you look at things like this. Like, to the layman, this would mean, oh, okay, Lord of the Rings reference. End of story. But when you start to do some additional digging and you realize that he's making a direct reference to the two towers of Solomon's temple, Boaz, and I believe it's Jasheen. And you start to unwrap all of that. The fact that they were built by a Canaanite mason called Haram Abif. And he's actually like a very prominent figure in Freemasonry. He's sort of the entire allegory for not divulging the secrets of the order, even under like threat of death or physical harm. And I believe this is like a direct allusion to that, especially when you start looking at everyone sort of coming behind this, let's rebuild the third temple, usher in the false Mashiach narrative that's going on, and the direct ties to like El worship and Saturn worship. And that, that to me pretty much seals the deal for Elon as far as being, you know, tied to the Masons. I would also, hope that people would take into consideration his very, very rapid rise over the last like 12, 15 years. And all of the connections that his parents have, and how, he was in South Africa when Peter Thiel's dad was, setting up those mines like in Nambia and the gold mine in Papua New Guinea and shit. And I don't have any proof that they have ties going that far back. But it is just all sort of coincidental that when Elon was growing up there, before he moved here, that Peter Thiel's dad was over there sort of running things for the US.
That makes total sense. That's fantastic. I didn't know that he was over there in South Africa, which makes even Juliet Bryant's actually in South Africa at the moment, who was the Epstein survivor that's on the show. So that's even more interesting. Could you bring that image that you saw at the top there with the two towers? So
Yeah.
one of them clearly is the image. So there's the two towers there, but the ones are the two rocket towers that you had up a minute ago. So
Yeah.
there's Elon's two towers in the background there. So you see obviously the twin towers as we've as well. 9/11 is mixed in there with the um sigil of Saturn, which is on the Balmoral Cross. But on the right tower from where we're looking at it from behind you,
Mm-hmm.
seems to be, I would say there's elements of the Caduceus snake going around that. Um on
Ah.
the right there, which could be a representation of Jesus as some of them they believe in an inverted belief system that he was like the baddie, the Satan type guy, and it's representing it's all twisted up depending on which system you look at. So
Hmm.
it's hard to tell what beliefs they have actually have these individuals, but it all kind of have a common theme here. But you're completely right. And he wrote Twin Towers on there, so it's not as if you're
Yeah.
just saying that. He wrote that on the tweet himself, Twin Towers. So 9/11, Sigil of Saturn, Gate of Apollo, Apollyon, Shiva, Mars, same character. He dresses up as the god of Mars with the Baphomet head and the inverted cross. So
Hmm.
it's not as if they're hiding it, are they? Was it about 2 weeks ago? He came out and wrote Ordo. I can never pronounce this.
Ordo
Novos or
Novus. Yeah.
Seclorum. That's
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he put that on there openly. He's had it on his jacket once. And then Trump's talking about the new golden age, which is the golden age of Saturn. So why
Hmm.
is it like when you see this stuff, why do you think it's difficult for people to accept it? I mean, it's quite obvious. They're blatant now. And I think they're even taking the mickey now out of the people that can't get it. So what do you think what was it with you that clicked and thought this is a code and it's quite blatantly out in the open now. It's not like it was even 20, 15 years ago. This code is quite easy to decipher. Do you think that they know that?
Yeah. I think that one of the biggest catches to their sort of belief system is having to have some sort of implied consent for their ritualistic tendencies. And one of my friends, actually, we do like a small podcast on the side and stuff called the Deep Web Pod. We're only about 30 episodes in, but he sort of educated me on their need to have like an informed consent. So where you see like predictive programming and things like that coming out, that really opened my eyes to okay, so essentially they're all convinced that they do have to have some sort of consenting participant as a sacrifice. And instead of telling someone directly, it becomes a form of implied consent by telling you indirectly. You look at do you remember the Obama movie that came out where like the ship is going towards the people? It's got like Ethan Hawke in it. It's called like Leave the World Behind or something. It was Obama funded, came out on Netflix, and it's about like this huge cargo ship crashing towards a bunch of people. And then almost, I think it's like a year or so after, the Three Body Problem came out on Netflix, had another disaster with a cargo ship. 2 weeks
Okay.
later, the cargo ship in Baltimore crashed under that bridge and caused that huge bridge collapse. And there's like all sorts of signs and things like that. And when I started to understand that, the goal is to hide in plain sight, and once you're able to make all of these connections and see these things, it becomes sort of like a slap in the face, in my opinion, where it's like they are taunting us and they are banking on the fact that people will just disregard it all because you know it's always framed in this negative light, whether it's a big media talking head person or it's some random bot on Twitter that tries to poke holes in a narrative or something. It's always they're willing to distrust everything until it starts to attack their own biases and things like that. I think Whitney Webb actually just made a post about that today where it's like, you guys will praise me when I attack the left, but then when I start to attack the right, it's like, you know, all the pitchforks come out.
Well, it does, yeah, exactly. And like what like we know, then they'll tell you that they control both sides by looking at the hermetic stuff. And this is why you have to look at loads of different things. And my kind of thing is I look deep into certain subjects, but then I move to a different subject because people get stuck in one subject and you can't build the piece if you just perfect
Mm-hmm.
that little piece. So there's only so much you really do need to know. You can go back and forth. But you need to look into things like hermeticism, into the occult, into like alternative histories, then the politics, then the Scientology, then science, then movies, then Hollywood. It goes through absolutely everything, as you said. And even when in Hermeticism, they'll tell you that they control the left and the right, which is the blue shift, red shift, which is the blue is the light going, I think, away from you, and the red shift is coming towards you. And that's the blue and red pill of the Matrix. They control both the Matrix
Hmm.
and the reality. They are actually telling you in films that they're actually controlling both. You don't wake up, you just come back awake within the dream. And they will tell you, as you say, it's called implied consent. Like they would tacit compliance is really kind of what it is. And that's the what they're going to sell to you is later on this whole system in China, what they're actually selling back to you is your own compliance. You get more freedoms that you should have had anyway, for the more compliant you are. So that's all it is compliancy currency. And that's what basically they want to put into place. It's not to do with anything else other than do as you're told. And that's what it is. It's compliancy.
Yeah, and honestly, it's a little shocking because people who I would consider or who I would have considered previously in like my social circles to be more libertarian leaning have jokingly mentioned how they would accept the like some form of social credit if it meant like, oh well, maybe this person won't cut me off in traffic. And I'm like, you don't understand the slippery slope that you're asking for a slight bit of convenience. Like
Yeah.
and it's the trading of like that security or the privacy and things like that for false promises of security that end up not being kept anyway. You know, the fact that people bank on the government keeping any promise they've ever made is still beyond me.
Yeah, it's beyond me too as well. Absolutely. Another subject that we wanted to get onto is the number 42. You've been looking into that because I just wanted to like guys at home just show you the depth of this man's knowledge and the fact that you do need to look into all of these different things and connect the different aspects to actually get an overall picture. I had a guy who was very good on MK Ultra, but then told me I'll never look into religion. I don't get involved with that stuff. I'm like, well, how are you supposed to know what the hell's going on?
Yeah.
Why do you think they want to brainwash people? Like it didn't make sense to me. Then he wrote a book about how Charles Manson's killing of um, Sharon Tate was an accident and a robbery, and I was like, yeah, okay. It clearly wasn't. It was a sacrificial ritual from Rosemary's
Yeah.
Baby. But yeah. So like 42. What's the information that you've come up with from this number?
So 42 is obviously an allusion to what I would say is the black cube of Saturn
Hmm.
cult. You know, they have this obsession with like gematria like allusions to the number six. So whether that's, you know, 17, which you'll see in the news cycles all the time, 17 shootings occurred over the weekend or something like that, that allude to what I would consider is them communicating with each other in media, where, you know, the number 25 is almost always associated with like sacrifice and things like that. So when they put like when they sent the Palestinians the COVID shots and there was 25 in the article like six times, I was like, oh, so they're just going to poison all the Palestinians instead of bombing them because it's better for PR.
Mm.
But 42, 17, obviously like 33 for the degrees of Freemasonry. Um, you know, a lot of people tend to forget that Douglas Adams' Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, the all-knowing computer that they put in charge of all humanity, when they ask it, you know, what is the meaning to life, it says 42. And I think that that was Douglas Adams' nod to like he came out later and said that it was just a random number that he picked. There's no way that that just so happened to be the number that became what was the answer of what is the meaning of life, you know. I'm trying to find a post that I had made where I broke down 42.
That's
It's here somewhere.
fascinating. So while you're looking for that, I just want to explain to people they might be a little bit confused as to why 17 matters. Now, I believe I'm not going to speak for you, but from what I can understand, what you mean by that is Roman numerals. If you put the one either side or the X either side, it takes off. It's like a subtraction. So you have the one before the seven. It's subtracted from the seven. Obviously, it becomes the six. So then you have to understand all these different kind of ways of them doing. So IXXI is 911 because obviously you've got nine, the X one side takes the 10 down to 9. So you've got 1x, which is 9, and x1, which is 11. So if that makes sense, That's kind of how they do it. They might not use Roman numerals, but they'll use the coding of it. So I think it was that what you meant by 17.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like when you look at the Roman numerals for 9, how it's IX and then 11 is XI, and when you spell it out in Roman numerals, it's the sigil of Saturn.
Mhm.
I found that post on 42, how it's like the Masonic representation of death. There's all sorts of like symbolism in the Bible. Uh, it says that the number represents the antagonism in natural cycles. The spirit is opposed to the matter, the good opposed to the evil, continue their fight in the oscillations of the world and result into the karma. Four
Wow.
plus two equals six. So it's 42 is like basically a direct illusion of like this cyclical fight between two that does end up churning out nothing but death and suffering.
Jesus,
Um,
yeah. When you start to look at these things, that you can find the links in there. So just type in 42 and Epstein, and you can see what's coming up. Epstein-Barr virus. Yeah. I mean, it's worth again. Once you know these codes, that's fascinating. I didn't know about the 42.
yeah, and they claim that in the Bible there's 42 generations of Abraham to Christ, like between Abraham and Christ, there's 42 generations, and they call them the 42 generations of David
Right.
to Christ. And the Gentiles will trample the holy city during 42 months. 42 months was the number of months given to the Antichrist to act and blaspheme, which is ironically enough about 3.5 years, or very, very close to what I would consider a president's term. Um, Now, I have my own theories on why JD Vance might end up becoming president a little sooner than people might think. But it would sort of line up with the 42-month thing once Trump takes office. I don't know if that makes sense, but
No,
in the next 3.5 years, once he takes office, it could very well set the stage for this biblical prophecy that they've been trying to drive towards. Not necessarily that it's prophesized to happen, but that they could manufacture the prophecy, which is what I think they're doing.
I completely agree with you. And they believe this stuff. The maths to them, they're computer nerds. A lot of them is coding, so they go by the maths. And if you look at, so have a look at when Trump was first president, which I think he was the what was it, the 40
45th,
45th? So it's
mm-hmm.
nine. And then what was the next one? It was the 40.
47, 11.
9/11. There you go.
That's crazy.
So they're telling you. They tell you to your face. And it's just like when you do it, you're like, gives you goosebumps. It does me anyway. Every
Yeah.
time it's goosebumps. It's like, so he's the 9/11 president, which is the gate of Apollo, which is Apollyon from the bottomless pit. So kings, I'm just bringing this up. I'm sharing this information with you, and I love this because I don't get to do this very often. So it's really good for me. So 42. So 1 Kings 11, 42 to 43. I'm not religious, by the way, but I see it as what they're working off. It's a textbook to them. And I'm not suggesting
Yeah.
that's how it was written first. I'm just suggesting that's how they've weaponized it. So 1 Kings 11:42 to 43. 11 is the number of Crowley, and obviously 9/11, but also the Twin Towers of the two 11s. But Crowley's number was 11. 42, the time that Solomon reigned in Jerusalem all over all Israel for 40 years. 43, Solomon slept with his ancestors and was buried in the city of his father David, and his son Rehoboam succeeded him. So they're using numbers 11 to 42 to 43 is about Solomon, and it's just an overview of him. And Rehoboam, I don't know if you know this, was the name of the system in Westworld that was their computer
Mm-hmm.
main hub in Westworld, the series, which is where all the AI was controlled from, and it was called Rehoboam.
Wow.
It's the
It
son of
really
Solomon.
is just, yeah, it's in plain sight. The
Mm.
And it even says here, like the Cabal speaks about the 42 Othioth, which I'm not even 100% sure what that is, and I'll have to look. But below that, it says, according to the Mesopotamian tradition, the surface of the Tower of Babel occupies 42 agrarian measures.
Right.
And it's like even going all the way back to Babylon and things like that. They were using the number 42 as like an esoteric thing because they've never done anything unintentionally. You know, there's too many people, too many pieces, and too much at stake for them to just operate without a methodology. It would be like an antithesis to their cause.
Which is really great, isn't it, mate? Because once you figure it out, you can say what they're going to do. So you can tell, like 9/11, obviously not going to be an accident that it was 9/11, but also 11/9 was supposed to be, because it doesn't matter which way around they use the numbers. 11/9 was supposed to be the time when both Solomon's temples, the first and the second, if you believe they existed, I don't, were supposed to be sacked. So apparently they were sacked 100 years apart or hundreds of years apart, but on the same day. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
So clearly these things aren't real stories. It's a mathematical code how they speak to each other of exactly how they do it. And they, if you know the dates, like October the 7th, of course it's going to be the 7th. It's the Sabbath for one thing, but it's the
Yeah.
7th. So one thing I found out recently was really fascinating to me, was that the guys who were tricked into going to the Capitol, Capitoline Hill,
Mhm.
on which is Rome, um, in Washington, D.C. It was on the 6th of January. Well, that's the Feast of the Fools.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm like, you guys have been tricked in by Trump, who's pipered you in there. And I watched that live. I don't know about you, but I actually sat there watching that live. And I'm like, there was a cut to a shot, and he was in one of these kind of tent things, watching it on the telly, laughing, like clapping along, because he's watching all these people go in there. I didn't know at the time it was the Feast of Fools. I only found that out recently. But it's the Feast of the Fools from the 12th night and the 12th night after Christmas. So it's the end of the Satanic or Saturnalia festival, where everything gets, it's called Topsy-Turvy Land as well, Topsy-Turvy Day or something like that. So it's
Yeah.
still practiced in Paris, which another place, Paris, Rome, Italy. Um, so you know that they do these things. So that's why, guys, it's important for people like us to point out these numbers and these things, because you can see what they're gonna do. You might not know specifically, but you know that if something big happens on them days, it's part of the scam.
Yeah. Yeah. And it seems like the the more that they're able to get away with, like the more blatantly obvious that they make it, the more that people just seem to be entranced by it. Like you can point out, look, it's literally. I feel like if Elon were to have posted the picture that I posted of the two towers of Solomon's temples and posted that in the same post, and you tried to yell at people that, hey, look, this is all Masonic imagery and things like that, they still would be like, yeah, whatever. He's cool because he tells liberals that they suck and he wants to fire the government. And I'm like, yeah, to replace it with AI because that's exactly what's happening.
It's so bizarre. Why do you think people can't see past that? They don't want to. It's cognitive dissonance to me. But and these are people like who followed the likes of Alex Jones for years. They know better. They know better.
Yeah, I think a lot of it has to do with sunken cost fallacy. Nobody wants to admit they were wrong, and it seems like a lot of the powers that are in play right now have sort of captured people's attention and their time and their efforts and given them hope and sold them this dream that they're coming to save them. So even if you spend 2 months with somebody trying to convince them, they have 8 years plus investment, or whatever it might be. Some people have been watching Alex Jones for 30 years, trying to get them to realize that 30 years of their life has essentially been a waste or a lie. It's sort of a hard pill, I think, for people to swallow. People aren't as malleable in the sense that people are too rigid in their principles, to they disregard the truth.
Yeah, I absolutely do. And another thing you wanted to go on to now, I don't know if you want to go on to it now. Is there something you want to cover before we come to Rome?
Uh, I mean, I think that one other thing that I did want to mention about just 42 specifically
Yep.
is I think that people will start seeing a rise in the use or glorification of it. I'm not sure if there's going to be like a false flag attack, if there's going to be like some sort of significant event that's going to happen very, very soon with the number 42 associated with it. It could be the number of celebrities that decide to get the Neuralink publicly,
Right. Okay.
something crazy like that. But 42 is also associated with slavery in gematria. And that ties into like the brain chips, the like the thought crime stuff that they're starting to do, digital ID, the adoption of Bitcoin, Elon's spy network. Like it's the what I would consider their number for what is about to come.
So keep an eye out for that. And obviously it's sixth, so that's the sixth day. And anyone who knows about the messianic stuff will know that the sixth day is the days that it took their God to create the world, and the seventh day was their Sabbath, their rest, which is the Saturn day of Saturn. Is it, or is it Saturday? Saturday.
Saturday, yeah.
Yeah, Saturday. So it's the sixth. So there's 6 days of creating the earth. Their Sabbath is the rest of the seventh day, which is we're now in the sixth millennium. So we want to get rid of all of us before the seventh
Yeah.
day because they don't want us to rest with them. And the Christians as well. You're not going to go up
Mhm.
in the sky with the rapture or the digital upload. You're going to be they're lambs to the slaughter. Literally, that's what it means. So and then the eighth day is their world to come.
Mhm.
So that's why they have the 8 day. We have a 7 day weekly cycle. They want to go beyond that and change the structure of reality and have an eighth day. And that's why they talk about Chronos and Saturn because they work with time and digits. It's all intertwined, isn't it? And it's fascinating to me that when you speak to people like this, I'll just get this before we go to Rome. Uh, I start to talk about these things and I get a glazed look very quickly. And I'm
Mhm.
like, do you get the same look? I find it very hard to do small talk nowadays.
Yeah, it seems that you can do all of this research that people will like into politics and money ties and things like that and be like, oh, this guy really knows his stuff. And then you apply that same thing to like theocracy or the occult or the esoteric, and all of a sudden you're looked at like you're crazy. And it's like I'm not the one that believes this stuff.
Exactly. Yeah.
I'm showing you what but like I want this gone. I want it to go away. I'm not pushing for this to be a thing in the world. You have to know what the problem is before you can take care of it. And I see the lack of education about these things and people's absolute refusal to dive into it, I guess, because of some stigma that's been applied. And it's like, well, if they're the ones that are studying and practicing all the occult stuff, they're always going to have an advantage because Sun Tzu says to know your enemy. If you're just going to ignore it all, they're just going to keep doing it and getting better and more brazen with it.
Yeah, and then once you point it out to them, like they know the enemy, they'll just ignore the enemy and then complain about bad things happening to them. And we're pointing out all this stuff, and also it just seems like so over the top. But it's
Mm-hmm.
again, I think what you've done is the nail on the head. I came out of the gym earlier, and I know that the place where I go to the gym is the Freemasonic Lodge of the bloody place because you put the Solomon's Temple picture right next to the place where I go into the gym, and it's Solomon's Temple. It's pretty
Yeah.
obvious. And you
Yeah.
come out and they've got Yakin and Boaz or Yachin and Boaz symbols everywhere. But once you see it, it's everywhere. So what the point you made, perfectly made, better than I'm making now, is that it is everywhere. So you're brought up around it, so you don't see it because it's just normal to you, and it just means something else. So but that comes from Babylon. And then it went to
Yeah.
Rome, didn't it? So how did it go from Babylon to Rome? What happened here? And this kind of shifting of this cult that now you see clearly, most obviously in Washington, D.C., with its seven hills. It used to be called Rome, Maryland, by the way. And that land was given to the government by a guy called John Pope. I'm not even joking. Um, yeah. So it's called Rome, Maryland, but now it's called Washington, D.C. because there's Maryland near it, so you can tell that that's obviously true. But yeah, so Rome is never went away, did it? Or the Babylon cult
Mm-mm.
never went away.
No, and I actually have while I was doing a little bit of research for this, I started to, I guess, formulate a hypothesis, which that I hadn't talked to you about discussing this on here, but it's very out there. And I just in the research that I've done into Rome and how Christianity spread there, I've pretty much come to the conclusion that the Abrahamic religion itself is an allusion to the ability to spread the Black Saturn cult along the Silk Road, and spread Islam to the east and Christianity to the west through Rome, and keep the east and the west sort of fighting with each other forever.
I
Um,
completely agree with what you've just said there. Absolutely. Because what you've just described there is the triangulation And the point in Hermetic principles, you're looking at the left and right paradigm of the line, and it's the top level that joins. You join the two together because they're equal from each other. So that would be what you just said. Basically, the Muslim or Islamic faith to the right, the red. The blue would be the Christian faith in this example, and the top being where the triangle meets in would be your triangulation or your Trinity. So
Mhm.
I think I completely agree with you. And there's some other information I know about the Silk Road. Um, that I think it was the Li family controlled one side, and it was the Bacharachs that
Backwards, yeah.
the Bacharachs controlled the other side, which became Bauer, which became Rothschild.
And always the Rothschilds. Even if you go thousands of years back, you end up running into one of them.
Yeah. So that's I think you
um,
would hit the nail on the head there.
I made a pretty interesting graphic actually with like the theory as I was going. I was sort of crafting an infographic, and I'd love to pull it up here and
Yeah,
share it with
absolutely.
you.
Yeah.
Um, so I've seen tons of stuff about how Noah, his ark was allegedly here, somewhere around like Mount Tinderek, or I think there's another mountain that's a little further north that people have suspected it to be. What is it, Dunuptir or whatever that. Uh, it's some other mountain that's further up in Turkey, but would still largely play the same role as this does here. So I was looking at like theologian records of where like all of the Abrahamic families sort of went to. So you can see like here in orange, where you have like the Ashkenaz up here, and you have Gomers, and just different sub lineations of what was originally just what I say is the tribe of Noah. I don't think Noah was a guy. I think that when they say Noah and his sons, I think they're talking about the groups of people that originated up here, and their son is the descendants or people that followed the traditions of these people. So whoever these people here in the mountains were Noah's people. You had Japheth, one of his sons here in the north. Japheth in Aramaic translates to beautiful or expansive, like open fields or sprawling mountain ranges like this one. You had Ham, which in Hebrew just means hot, or all of these desert areas. So like the Babylon down here, and you had like the Shinar and all these like small little subsects as well, including like Canaan and things like that, which descended directly from like Ham in their Bible. Canaan is the son of Ham, mentioned directly, and then you also get Sidon, which is the son of Canaan. And I'm sorry to be like ranting on this, but in Canaan, you had Bethlehem, which translates to the hot house of El, uh, and Shelf or Shem was the third one, which in Arabic translates to shelf or shelf dweller, and is where we actually get the term Semite from. It used to be Shemite, and sort of loosely all came together. Abra means father of many, but in Arabic it means crossing. So if you have Abraham, you have father of many hot crossings. Well, the only hot crossing there is the Silk Road, which pushed Abraham religion to the west with Rome and east with Islam. And I don't know. I believe that the worship of Abraham in and of itself is uh, they're worshiping this, whatever this system, this process is, whatever allowed them to capture both sides of the globe through this. I think is what they're worshiping instead of like an actual person. Because he even talks about pitching his tent in Canaan. Abraham pitches his tent in Canaan, and that's when like the identity or God revealed himself to Canaan from Sidon and Canaan. They went across for the Silk Road and ported directly into Rome. And then that's where you started getting all of those Canaanite priests. You had like Eusebius and things like that, who started to influence Constantine, his parents, and when we can start getting into Rome from there. But this was kind of my theory as I was going, as I was like, maybe they're not even talking about actual people, but like a group of people or a place or traditions, because geologically and like historically speaking, this makes way more sense than it being like one guy.
That makes total sense. And it fits in with other things. And I think what we need to do, like people who look at this and go, well, that doesn't really match what I've thought before, is that these could be multi-layered and mean many different things in terms of they fit actually fit together. Like Abraham could come from the A Brahmin, which is the Indian Hindu religion. The top level is the priest class called Brahmin. So it
Mm,
seems that Abraham was just a title as the Christ was. So that
yeah.
could still fit in with what you're saying. They're carrying different the information. It doesn't mean that one thing doesn't fit in with another. They're just carrying that title of Abraham, the priest class, which is the group or tribe of priests. So it all fits in. Like, and I think people are very kind of close on, oh, well, this is what I believe. Actually, we're just putting bits of this puzzle together. That makes total sense to me. Absolutely makes total sense to me. And we will look now where it comes to the British and the Americans, and there's a thing called British Israelism, where the British black nobility and which spawned out the US Freemasons, those type things. You control those guys. Bourbon Two Sicilies, these Papal black nobility. They believe they are descendants from one of the lost tribes of Israel. It's called British Israelism. Is absolute lunacy, but it would make sense there because that's how they trace this back, and they believe that they're of the tribe of Joseph, um, who split into two tribes. So it was all watered down, and but that's why they want. That's why you have the UK and the US, by the looks of it, always backing Israel because the governments there believe they are the descendants of them. And when you look into the biblical text, which is even more worrying, it's the tribes of Jacob who suffer the
Mhm.
worst of the tribulations. So they're trying to drag us into World War III because we're supposed to only go down to 10%. That's why the US and the UK is getting decimated and dragged into stuff that's none of their business because the occultists, these black nobility bloodlines, believe that's all part of this messianic agenda, or at least playing along with that. So it's really disturbing when you start to realize how they've actually weaponized this into these biblical texts. Now, I agree with you. I actually would go as far as to say, and I know some other researchers say this, that the Abrahamic religions were possibly written to be collided against each other originally. Certainly that's how they're being used, but I wouldn't be surprised if this goes back 8,000 years.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, if you want my opinion, I see like the divide with like the left and the right being the exact same thing. Where if you remove all of the identity politics talking points and you just look at their actions, they're doing the same things. They want the same things in essence. And then you start bringing in all these minute differences and things like that that still ultimately drive them to the same destination that they fight about. It's like they're fighting in the car while they're both pedaling forward, arguing about which way they're going. Um, and I would even say, that this might even add credence to the Indian Brahim theory that the Silk Road tied all the way back to India and is what brought it over into the Middle East. And it could be that Brahim was being used, and then the Arabic people said, "Oh, well, this must mean this," and misinterpreted it. It could be a variety of different things, and I think that keeping your mind open to, while this may be saying something different, it could be just another perspective. You view what is it, a circle that's like three-dimensional going back, but if you look at it from the side, it's a cube. Just kind of seeing a different angle of it, and hopefully helping to add like credence to the theory itself.
I agree with you, and these things stack up upon each other, and you find a common theme, which is what we do. Is they are this is investigative journalism, proper investigative journalism, and that's what you do. You piece things together. It's no different from being an I mean, I would probably be if I go back to my 20s, something like a police investigative like police officer because this is the stuff. It's the same mentality. You start to be able to read the situation. So, guys, we're going to head over to the second hour. So next week you'll see this second hour. So we're going to continue filming, but next week you'll see this second hour.